And I'm all excited about my new garden because I'm seeing tons of bees and butterflies and wasps and all that. So I'm excited to hear, she's a master gardener and they've done such a marvelous job with our garden. And then following that, Kathy Beebe, and Kathy's been really busy. She apologizes. She hasn't been at everything lately, but she has bringing in the city of Ocala water guy to talk about the state of water in Ocala. So we brainstormed yesterday on kind of what topics might be good to, and some of that does tie to water conservation is a big part of gardening and ties all into that. And then the following, okay, so that's on the 18th. And then the 25th, I've put down, I'm doing a review of Doug Talmey's book called Nature's Last Hope. But what I'm going to try to do is kind of wrap up everything we've talked about. Nature's Last Hope talks about how you can play a big role in helping, bring in nature and save water and all that. So Judith and Joanne and I were lucky enough to hear him talk in South Carolina last year, and he's an amazing guy. So anyway, I think we have a great lineup. And then summer, a lot of things are cooking. Let's save that for next week. Susan's got something great she's planning. The book club is going to meet on the 14th on Zoom. What time is that, Mary Beth?
11 a.m. I'll send out the announcement and the link to everybody on Crossroads, as well as everybody on my book club list. If you're not on my book club list and want to be, then let me know.
Yeah,
I can't be there on that day, but I do want to be included.
Okay. If you have any suggestions, let me know.
and date preference on dates. I think y'all kind of settle on the date and the books. So
That's when we decide on the books and the dates we're going to discuss them and who's going to lead the discussions, that kind of thing.
So Susan's got a great. Go ahead, Susan. Your summer thing that you're planning real quick.
Yeah, this will be kind of a follow-up to what we did last year with a book by John Philip Newell, who is a poet and author, a preacher, a teacher of the Celtic tradition, spirituality. Okay. This book is entitled The Great Search, and it talks about our feeling of being removed from something that's essential and what we are looking for in our spiritual lives. And he devotes 9 chapters to 9 individuals who were people who sought for various things, for wisdom, for hope, for love, for courage. And it's got some powerful ideas to it, and I think we will enjoy studying that. Giving some thought to doing it on Sunday during this hour, but not every Sunday. Maybe every 2 or 3 weeks we'll have one until the summer is done.
And then Bob and Annette are cooking up something around the theme of prayer, right, for the summer?
Well, to be discussed. I see Annette and she's smiling. So Annette had suggested we do maybe instead of a Bible study this summer, do something on the topic of prayer. So I've been grabbing some resources. We'll sit down together and see if that's something we'd like to do. So to be TBD, to be determined.
So we've got an exciting summer. I'm all excited for the people that are involved in that. So I don't want to hog any more of Susan's time.
Chris has a book that she wants to make sure everybody signs.
Yeah, I read it. We're having graduate recognition today. This is for Raheem. So there's a book and I'll be back.
Thank you, Chris, for doing
Thank you,
that.
Chris.
Gosh, there's one quick thing and we're going to put it was. Okay. Anyway, I know what I said. So I apologize. I didn't have time to figure out. I've got a wireless mic system that I bought for the Hope House. Apparently they don't need it. So I'm gonna try to come in someday and experiment with it in here. I just don't want it to compete with Zoom, you know, I don't know if it needs to be plugged in. But Mary Beth, sometimes we've heard from the Zoomers, that especially the questioning
Right.
doesn't come across, and it's a wireless thing, so I know enough to be dangerous, but anyway, I might see if Hal or somebody smarter than me can come in and we can play with it. But I'll leave it here in the room, so if we ever need it for something else. All right, thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Going to open today with reading from Psalm 139, which is prayer-like. I'm going to let that be our opening prayer. Where I'm going with this exploration this morning is back to our origins. I'm not a gardener, but we talk about the Garden of Eden as our genesis in God. And this psalm is well known as praise for being fearfully and wonderfully made. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high, I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright to me as the day. The darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. That I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them has yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. When I come to the end, I'm still with you. Margaret proposed this idea to me along the line of gardening. But I'm not a gardener. I love getting out and exploring things and getting my hands dirty and turning over rocks and finding things. But setting out flower pots is sort of my thing, but not in a serious manner. My flower pots all look like they need some tender love and care. But this is about seeing ourselves as made in the image of God. That when God spoke creation into being, He put a spark of divine life and love into everything that was made, ourselves included. And that is the means by which we are able to communicate with God and God with us. See and hear that voice that is deeply in everything that is made. And we've kind of lost that. We live in a sanitized convenience world where we can manipulate things like heat and cold and light and darkness. And we lose the rhythm of the creation and the communication that was inherent in our relationship with God. What God envisioned, I think, was very much like the peaceable kingdom of Isaiah's vision, where the wolf and the lamb lie down together, and fearsome beasts are content to graze, and there is no hurt on anywhere in God's creation. But we lost that. And yet it isn't lost. We wandered away, God did not. There is still that spark within us that can communicate with God and God with us if we listen for that voice and observe what God is trying to tell us in creation. So getting back to it is the thing. It's a little song that we sometimes sing, haven't for several years, but it stuck with me the first time I heard it. And it's meant to be sung as a round. It has only 4 lines to it. But it says, listen to the word that God has spoken. Listen to the one who is close at hand. Listen to the voice that spoke creation. Listen, even if you don't understand. Trust that the Spirit will interpret to us what we need to hear. John Philip Newell mentioned just a moment ago, someone I have followed for a number of years, not only in his books, but I've attended one of his retreats and just feel a great affinity for the sorts of things that he, in his patient, quiet, disarming way, reveals. He talks about, being born not by God, but of God. Everything that God spoke into being at creation has a part of God's self within it. And we have kind of lost that. He says, what is it we have forgotten about ourselves and one another? In the Celtic tradition, the Garden of Eden is not a place in space and time from which we are separated. It is the deepest dimension of our being from which we live in a type of exile. It is our place of origin or genesis in God. Eden is home, but we live far removed from it. And yet in the Genesis account, the garden is not destroyed. Rather, Adam and Eve become fugitives from the place of their deepest identity. It is a picture of humanity living in exile. At the beginning of the Hebrew scriptures, the book of Genesis describes humanity as being made in the image and likeness of God. This is fundamental and a fundamental truth in our biblical inheritance. Everything else that is said about us in the scriptures needs to be read in the light of that starting point. But what does it mean to be made in the image of God? What does it mean to say that the garden is our place of deepest identity? In part, it is to say wisdom is deep within us, deeper than the ignorance of what we have done or become. It is to say that the passion of God for what is just and right is deep within, deeper than any apathy or participation in wrong that has crippled us. To be made in the image of God is to say that creativity is at the core of our being, deeper than any barrenness that has dominated our lives and relationships. And above all else is to say that love and the desire to give ourselves away to one another in love is at the heart of who we are, deeper than any fear or hatred that holds us hostage. Deep within us is a longing for union, for our Genesis, and the one from whom all things have come. Our home is the garden, and deep within us is the yearning to hear its song once again. So, dear fallen people, are we just, we put it aside in favor of pursuing other things? And we need to get back to it. We are homesick creatures, I think. That in spite of how we feel about the myth of creation, you know, that's impossible, that's a lot of hooey. There is a deep truth in it, in spite of its lack of scientific sustainability. And it is something that we miss. We long for the way it was meant to be, and we want to get back to it. It's a long-held belief that creation was good, it was harmonious, it was loving. What God spoke into being was pure God love. Scripture alludes to it, and even in popular music, we catch glimpses of it from time to time. You may remember Joni Mitchell's song, Woodstock. She wrote in 1969. She and Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, or many other names go in that group, were playing a gig in Chicago, and the next day they were to go to Woodstock, and she had a commitment otherwise and was not able to go, but she wrote a song for them, which they sang. And in those words, there is this longing for what we've missed. It says, we are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. I feel to be a cog in something turning. I don't know who I am, but you know, life is for learning. We are stardust, billion-year-old carbons. We are golden, caught in the devil's bargain. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Even secular sources, there is this feeling that we at this time. We need to regain it. We need to be able to understand it and imprint it. I know that many people here love Mary Oliver, so do I. And she gets it. The natural world plays a significant part in her poetry, her poetic imagery, and so does her faith. She writes about beauty and mystery and miracle and revelation. I think sometimes that if the Psalms were being compiled in our day instead of thousands of years ago, Mary Oliver would have been in there.
I agree.
Many of her poems contain poignant twist of enlightenment. There are deer and otter and birds and snakes and trees and fields and waters and oceans. They all populate her with insights about the communion of creation under the Holy Spirit that was meant to be at the beginning. I want to read a couple of those and listen for that connection. This one is called The Beautiful Striped Sparrow. She's musing about the music that she heard in church. Words didn't stay with her, didn't hold her, but the music did, and she hums them as she walks along. In the afternoons, in the almost empty fields, I hummed the hymns I used to sing in church. They could not tame me, so they would not keep me, alas. And how that feels, the weight of it, I will not tell any of you, not ever. Still, as they promised, God, once He is in your heart, is everywhere. So even here among the weeds and the brisk trees, how long does it take to hum a hymn? Strolling 1 or 2 acres of the sweetness of this world, not counting a lapse now and again of sheer emptiness. Once a deer stood quietly at my side, and sometimes the wind has touched my cheek like a spirit. Am I lonely? The beautiful striped sparrow, serenely on the tallest weed in His kingdom, also sings without words. This one is called In the Storm, where she speaks about miracle and kindness in the animal world that we think is only the purview of our humanity. But she sees it in what we call the lesser forms of life, that are maybe higher than we are, even if we think of it. Some black ducks were shrugged up on the shore. It was snowing hard from the east, and the sea was in disorder. Then some sanderlings, 5 inches long with beaks like wire, flew in, snowflakes on their backs, and settled in a row behind the ducks, whose backs were also covered with snow. So close they were all but touching. They were all but under the roof, the ducks' tails. So the wind pretty much blew over them. They stayed that way, motionless, for maybe an hour. And then the sanderlings, each just a handful of feathers, shifted and were blown away out over the water, which was still raging. But somehow they came back, and again the ducks, like a feathered hedge, let them crouch there and live. If someone you didn't know told you this, as I'm telling you this, would you believe it? Belief isn't always easy, but this much I have learned, if not enough else, to live with my eyes open. I know that everyone wants a miracle. This wasn't a miracle. Unless, of course, kindness, as now and again some rare person has suggested, is a miracle. Surely it is. I promised you stories, so you get to participate. Think about Mary Oliver and her relationship with the created world. Have there been times when you have been surprised by God, encountered something in the animal world particularly that, you know, just blew you away, brought you to tears, touched you with a poignance or a deeper understanding of what our relationship to creation is? I invite you to think about those things and share them with us.
Shouldn't start out, but I will. I was at Silver Springs, working in Silver Springs, and my office faced the parking lot, the back parking lot where the employees were, and there were big cypress trees in the parking lot. And my boss and I are looking at, and there's a duck, a mama duck, up in the cypress tree with her nest of ducklings, and it was time for them to learn to fly and to get out of the nest. And so she starts pushing those ducks out onto the concrete parking lots, one by one, and they kind of, and I don't remember, 5 or 6 of them, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're all gonna die, you know? And then they all kind of shook themselves up, lined up behind mom, and she beelined for Silver Springs. And it was just such an amazing thing, you know. You know, I'm sure this happens time and time again, but it's not always even over a man-made parking lot. God was able to let these little ducklings survive, and I'm sure a few got chomped by alligators as they went down the river. That's pretty normal, but it was fun watching that whole episode.
They're little puffballs, so they kind of float down.
You know, what-
Alligator would find much more than a popcorn snack. Ate one. Nonetheless.
the thing that I thought of when you brought that up was very similar. This was probably 10, 12 years ago. Art and I watched the whole process. There was a mockingbird built, or 2 mockingbirds built their nest right outside our lanai, outside the screen of our lanai. And we watched the whole process with the laying of the eggs, the hatching of the eggs, and just what Margaret was describing, the birds, the baby birds, then fledgling birds, finally taking their first little flight, jumping out of the nest, and then sort of hop flying away. It was so meaningful and exciting. It really was. Yeah.
Sometimes we are privileged to see something we wouldn't accept. Any other stories? you can Share with us.
When we read Margaret Mead's book on joy for all in women, in researching, came across that iconic clip of her quite elderly in life when she released one of the gorillas that she had tendered and cared for and her team had cared for. And watching that, you cannot help but understand the connection, because when they were ready to release that giant ape back into the wild, into the natural habitat, came out and she was right there. And he came right over to her and just embraced her. And if you can't be moved by that, it was just extraordinary. Of course, it's gone viral and they've made it, kind of cinematic, if you would, but the heart of that encounter, that's what you draw on. And as I said, every time I see it, I cry, because it is so incredible, so incredible. And then he goes on back into his natural, where he's supposed to be, or she, I'm not sure which one, but anyway, that has stuck with me. That has just stuck with me.
I think we are meant to communicate with
Mm-hmm.
the natural world in ways that might seem other than human to us. And yet there are human traits that go through all of us. My son and his wife recently took a second cat into their home. The older cat had been with them for about 10 years. He was a feral cat that insisted that was his home. I know they took him in. The little cat was semi-feral, little female. She was even now only about 11 months old, still a kitten. But when she came to live with them, she was frightened. She didn't want anything to do with humans. But in January, I got to spend a week cat sitting. I had to deal with this little thing that wanted nothing to do with me. We play with the older cat, tease him, run up and count coo on him and run, hide. But if I looked at her cross-eyed, she would freeze and hide for the back room. So one day I was sitting on the couch and she was doing the zoomy things, jumping all over the place, and she started to jump up on the couch and froze when she saw that I was sitting there and stared at me like, what am I going to do? Do I bolt and run or what? While we were locked in that stare, I said to her, Cece, you are a beloved child of God. And so am I. That makes us sisters. And you don't need to be afraid of me. We are one in the eyes of our Creator. And I hope the Holy Spirit will interpret that to you. Because you are so sweet. I want to just love you, but you won't let me. So she went through her what am I going to do thing, and finally she bolted through the back of the house. 2 hours later, I was watching TV, sitting on the couch with my hands out to my side. Suddenly I felt a raspy little tongue licking my hand. I thought it was, must be the older cat because he was used to me. And I looked down and it was the kitten. And when cats lick you, that means your family. This is an acceptance. And when she
John
was-
Lasek sent email, used to send emails on it with different clips in it. And one of them was a, reunion of all different kind of animals that knew somebody from the past and hadn't seen them for years, you know. They just, they just jumped around and wanted their attention, and it was, they remembered. They remembered that this person was kind to them some time in the past, even elephants, I mean, all kind of animals. It was amazing.
I've been blessed to see many of the great beasts of the earth in their natural habitat. One was seeing elephants in Botswana. Some of them were carrying bones. And it said that they retain a memory of their companions who have died. And will keep vigil over that dead body until it's disintegrated. And they will take a piece of bone and carry it for remembrance. We revere and honor our past loved ones. So do animals. We bond over that. Both of my brothers, the one who died before I was born, that I never knew, and my brother David, who many of you knew, both had dogs present when they breathed their last. One was the dog of a family friend who was had taken in my mother and dying baby because there was no room in the hospital. And the dog would not leave my mother's side. It sat with its head on her lap. And the host kept trying to get the dog out. Finally dragged him out and put him in another room. And I thought, what an awful thing to do. And that was a moment of connection that that wasn't to be missed. And when David was dying, he realized he had not been turned for about 24 hours. He was in the same position. His daughter Carol was there with her dogs, and one of those dogs would not leave the room. So the nurse came and she was attempting to turn him. He groaned in pain and the dog groaned too. And it's just this harmonic sound coming from each of them that indicated a sympathy and an understanding that's well beyond our ken. We are connected.
Yeah, I once had two black labs and they wandered off. And 2 days later, Babe came home and I said, Babe, where is Sandy? And she let out the most awful howl. And she was too exhausted. We tried to go look, never found Sandy ever again.
Baby.
My sister gave me a milkweed plant, and you may know that monarch butterflies lay their eggs exclusively on milkweed. And before long, were all these little black and yellow and white caterpillars crawling all over the plant. And I watched them grow until one was so big. And I thought, I'm sure he's ready, and he disappeared. And I wondered if maybe the lizards got them or something, but I think the lizards don't eat them. But anyway, I saw it up on the shed in the back of my house, a little green cocoon. I watch this thing daily until the monarch butterfly came out. And it's such an amazing constellation. In fact, my daughter used that last week at Easter for the kids' story to show this, the caterpillar lives, as it were, and then it arises as this amazing butterfly. And so that's just a wonderful tale.
We had one here in this class a couple of years ago. Barbara left
Yeah.
early and she walked out just in time to see one coming out of the chrysalis. I have one more story that to me is very poignant. It didn't happen to me, it happened to my son and his wife. After my husband had died, they had been present with him when he breathed his last. Albert's daughter and I each had one hand, and Jeremy and Jenny each had one foot. And saw him out. So the weekend afterward, they went to the beach to, do their grieving. They walked for probably longer than they ordinarily would have on the beach, wanting just to be there, mostly in silence, but in a place they loved. Jenny revealed later that she had been communing with Albert afterward, saying, I know that the end of your life was rough. I want to make sure you're okay. I'd like you to send me a sign. And since you are a marine biologist, I want that sign to be a dolphin. They went to their favorite restaurant on the Intercoastal Waterway and sat looking out over the water. They usually eat very fast, being teachers. They're trained to eat in 15 minutes. And they spend a long time. This time, Jenny kept saying, "No, let's just sit here and enjoy this." She had not told Jeremy what she was looking for. Finally, no dolphin came, and so they decided to go. Jeremy said, "Oh, let's walk out on the pier before we leave." And they did. And no dolphin came. And they were about ready to leave. And they noticed on the far bank of the Intercoastal Waterway a pair of dolphins. And this seems almost too good to be true, but one of the dolphins left its mate and swam across the Intercoastal Waterway right to where they were standing at the pier. And it got up and did its flipper thing.
Yeah.
Up on its tail. And then went back in the water and swam back over to the other side. It was at that point that Jenny told Jeremy what she was looking for. And they were both in tears. And every time they tell that story, it gets me too. But it was just so perfect, a communion of human and animal, and probably a mix of God in the midst of it. And put all that together and made it a beautiful thing. I told that story at Albert's memorial service. And he had said, there will be those stories. I said, that they have a story to tell. And he said, well, maybe they would like to read the scriptures. I told them, read the scriptures. While you're up there, tell that story.
There you go, girl.
I got the name.
It needed to be in to the script. Yes. So maybe an unexpected animal encounter or trees that seem like sentient beings that, you know, share their wisdom with us. Maybe features of land or sea or sky that you just move us to tears with their beauty or astound us with their complexity. And there are all kinds of things in nature that speak to our connection with the rest of creation and with our Creator. Yet this contemplative life that urges us to see beyond ourselves, see back to our origins and the connection of all things, that fosters us in us a greater love for creation, including humanity. Getting ourselves back to the garden is to follow Jesus' commandment to love one another. Mary Oliver again says that very well. This is from a poem that is longer. She entitles it 6 Recognitions of the Lord. There are 6 different poems. Number 5 says this: "Oh, feed me this day, Holy Spirit, with the fragrance of the fields, and the freshness of the oceans which you have made, and help me to hear and to hold in all dearness those exacting, wonderful words of our Lord Christ, Jesus saying, 'Follow me.'" And it's in that following that commandment to love one another, that helps us to see beyond what we consider other, and to connect and communicate with it in ways that may surprise us and possibly them. So this is another storytelling opportunity. Have you ever had an encounter with a perfect stranger that felt like a God thing? If you have and want to share that story, you're welcome to now.
Them all the time, just momentary sparks.
Bernice?
In 2009, Bob and I were headed to Virginia, and a big semi pushed us off the road on the left-hand side, doing 70 miles an hour. Bob overcompensated, pulled us all the way back across I-95 and flipped us upside down. There were people behind us. They stopped, they got us out of the car. But I know that there was an angel riding with us that day, because there was a highway patrolman ahead of us who heard the accident, came back, got us taken care of, took us to a place where our car was impounded and we could still see it. And that day, he was there. They were with us in the car. And this stranger spent a great deal of time with us, seeing that we were taken care of, seeing that we got to a place where we could wait for Marcia to drive 5 hours back to get us. And the people who stopped were so, I mean, we've never seen these people. And the one woman said to me, "Get your purse out of the car." It was amazing.
I had a encounter and I wrote a poem like right after this and it's hard to talk about this because I felt like I ignored God. It was at a restaurant in Miami. Had to go to Miami every 3 weeks for my job. And I was in a restaurant and there was a railing between me and the outside sidewalk. And it startled me. I was starting to eat and some guy's like right up to, I mean, I felt, oh, and he was a homeless guy and he was looking for, and you know, we have these encounters all the time. People tell you, don't give them money. I don't know. It was something about that. So I just kind of, you know, I was really nervous. He was so close and this and that. I was like, you know, kind of pushed him away. But I don't know. I just had this notion when I got back to my hotel room and I wrote a poem, God in strange places or God in everyday places or something. I mean, I just had this notion there was more to that than just this homeless guy looking for money. And I had totally ignored him, you know, and I don't know, I just felt it really stuck with me.
Can you take one from Zoom?
Yes, please.
Okay, Margaret, I'm going to tell you something that happened to me because it's so similar. But you never knew my friend Daylene, but I think some of the people from Art for All knew her. And before she came to Florida, she found out she had cancer when she was in New Mexico. And we were taking her always to Arizona to get treatment because it was more modern and up-to-date treatment. And it was once a month for her cancer. Well, we were stopped at a gas station and I drove a Toyota Tundra then, and the windows were rolled down. And this very frightening, almost looking street man came across and came right to Daylene's window. And she immediately wanted to roll it up. And she said, you know, and I said, don't roll it up, don't roll it up. And he reached in and he touched her hand and he said, may I pray for you? And in English, he looked like he was maybe Hispanic, maybe Native American, very unwashed. And he prayed for her in a language that we didn't understand. And then he said, thank you. And then he walked away and disappeared into the desert. And to this day, I think that she lived for so long with that cancer and came to Florida and had the life. She came here, quote unquote, to die. And we ended up bucket listing for 4 years and 8 months before she actually passed away. And I still say that was an angel.
Great story, Kathleen.
I seem to have an attraction to people who walk up to me out of nowhere asking for a handout. And yet some of them were occasions that I would not have missed by ignoring or sending them away. And so, you know, one was a young family that was living in their van with a 20-month-old and a newborn. Wanted to sell me their country music albums so they could afford to buy diapers for babies. You know, I reached in my pocket and pulled out all I had in it and gave it to them. And I said, you keep your music, maybe somebody else will buy it. And I heard them say, as I was walking away, she just gave us everything she had. And one of the men said, yeah, someday we're going to do that too. Just very touching. My favorite story along that line occurred, one day I'd been to Dollar Tree to get some things for art at the Skill Day Center. And there was a $10 bill was rolling across the parking lot. I stepped on it to stop it and picked it up, and I was in the midst of thinking about what I could do with an extra $10. And I heard a voice out somewhere saying, "Excuse me, do you think you could help me?" Took me a while to locate the voice, and I did. It was a young man, looked like he was maybe 19 or 20. Clean cut, well dressed, but apparently in some sort of distress. I said, "How can I help you?" He said, "Well, I stayed at Salvation Army last night, and I need to stay there again, but it's only free for one night, and after that I have to pay $8 and I don't have it." I thought about closing my hand. I said, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "Yes, ma'am, I do. That's how I manage in this world. And I've been praying all day. And I really, really, really hate to ask you for help, but my prayer hadn't been answered and it's going to be dark soon. And so I thought maybe I'd better ask you." And I wanted to say, "Your answer, my friend, was blowing in the wind." But didn't know if he would know that reference. So I told him, how I had come by the $10, and he says, "Really? Are you sure you want to give it to me?" So I think that's what it's for. That's not my money, that's God's money. And so he said, "Before I leave, can I ask you one more thing?" I thought, what now? I don't have anything in my pocket that's going to help him in any way. I've got maybe $2 or $3 left. And he said, "What I need to ask is, if I've seen TV programs, and this kind of seems like one of those. And so I need to ask, are you an angel?" I said, "Not the kind with a halo and wings and a harp, but I do believe that we are each other's angels from time to time, and we are led in that direction. And somehow we know when it's the right thing to do. And you are the right thing to do with this $10. And I said, I firmly believe that we are each other's angels. And someday you are going to have the opportunity as well. You said you couldn't thank me, you couldn't pay me back for this gift. And there's no need to thank me, it's from God. The way you return that thanks is when you have the opportunity like this, you will be somebody else's angel. And it may happen over and over and over again. I think I'll confess to that. But do it without hesitation. He said, "Maybe you are an angel," which is too sweet. Any other stories?
This isn't a story, but at the beginning, of the class time, Annette put up, Annette, are you still on? Anyway, she put up a question. Does anyone know where I can find the Egyptian hymn that is based on Psalm 139? I have it only in the Thai language. So she wrote that right after you'd read Psalm 139. I don't know. Does anybody know an Egyptian hymn that's based
There
on?
are several indices in the back of Pendles that show the origin of the hymn. And some of them, they're scriptural reference. So it's quite possible she can look up Psalm 139
Hmm.
in one of those indexes and it will, if it's possible, lead to it.
Mhm, yeah.
I would love to have the, gosh. I would love to have the name of that Joni Mitchell song
Mhm.
and the short hymn that you had, the 4 sentence hymn.
That was in our hymnals.
And yeah, and because I think that would be a great meditation thing to use. It's just, I remember singing it before, but it's just beautiful. Thank you.
I have a couple of other short stories that were very touching to me from traveling abroad. One of them, I was on a tour of the Holy Land, and we'd taken a side trip into Jordan, go to Petra. And we'd stopped just near Amman to view some Roman ruins there, and I was walking around taking pictures because I'm fascinated by old architecture. It's crumbling. The man walked up to me and said, "Are you an American?" And I didn't know how he felt about Americans, but I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You seem like a very kind and loving and peaceful person." He said, "I have my children with me. I want them to meet you. When they hear that Americans are ugly and selfish and self-centered and greedy and lorded over everyone else, I want them to be able to say, I've met an American who knows the way of peace." So he lined them all up. The eldest was about 12 and the youngest about 2. And we shook hands and exchanged greetings, blessings. That was just something else. Another time I was in Indonesia. We had gone aboard one of the remote islands just to see how people live. And it was just a lovely experience. The children were learning to read from cast-off American textbooks. And I saw one little girl, what I recognized as my first grade primer. And the cover was torn off in crayon, named Susan. I thought, that may very well be actually my book. And I tried to explain that to her and said, "I'm Susan. And that book belonged to Susan. She did this. She was afraid I would take it from her. We never could communicate that." I was just amazed that their children were being taught to read English. A couple of teenage boys saw my name on my camera back. Susan Jensen. And they were telling everybody else I was Susan Jensen. But was one person there that I wanted to get a picture of. He was an old grizzled gray man with a beard and such. Looked totally different from the rest of them. And he was threshing rice to get the hulls off of it. He had the rice in a long wooden trough that looked like it was hand carved. And he had this rhythm going with a piece of bamboo, shoving it down onto the rice and catching it with his other hand and just doing this back and forth, threshing the rice. And I tried to take a picture of him, and he suddenly ran behind a tree, looked out. And I walked on, and he went back to work, and I tried 3 times to take a picture, and he hid behind the tree. Well, pretty soon it was time for us to go. And I still hadn't made any contact with this man. But all of a sudden, there he was beside me. And he said, "You American?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I, Japan." World War II had been over for 51 years. And apparently, he had either stayed there or been left there, just became part of that island. The last thing he said just broke me up. And it really said, "No enemy, no more war." Wouldn't have missed that for the world. We're getting to, I need to end this, but I want to leave you with some blessings that I wrote for this occasion. May you always remember that you are a part and a partner of God's creation, and that it will share your joys as well as your sorrows. May you be open to receive the gifts of the universe with gratitude, to share them freely with others, and to delight in unexpected surprises. May the divine spark of light and life and love that was instilled in you at creation always shine in recognition of kindred creatures of the earth. May you be so deeply rooted in the Creator's love that you grow in stature and strength like the trees of the forest, offering shelter, shade, and sustenance to others by your own self-giving acts of blessing and grace. And may you be bold enough to lay aside your obsession with what all of this means. Simply follow the wild spirit of God beyond your self-drawn boundaries into the broadening way of creation's holy sanctuary and its ever unfolding horizons. Open your eyes, your ears, your hands, your arms, your heart, your mind, your spirit. Bask in divine presence. The kingdom of which Jesus often spoke is here and now in your midst and of your making. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan, so much.
And I forgot to bring Kleenex with me. I have one.
Hi, everybody on
Table over
Zoom.
Okay.
Miss Susan.
Uh-huh.